Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Miranda was sitting in front of the mirror, beside which there were jars of makeup and cosmetics, and she was changing from a pretty blonde girl of 20 with gray eyes to a witch with long black braids and looking like a 70-year-old grandmother. She had chosen her costume accordingly, too, a long black hooded robe with a half face and a wooden stick with a snake's head on the handle. She had an important day today. There was a New Year's Eve party at a big bank, and she had been booked to do fortune-telling in a marquee, a sort of theatrical production to amuse the guests. They promised very good pay. The event was held outside the city, so they sent a company cab to pick her up at the appointed time. It was a long way, and on the way Miranda was looking out the window at the snow-covered trees passing by, and was sad, remembering her beloved grandmother, who had died only a couple of months before. The thing is, Nina was a fortune teller and a healer, and the whole village went to her for treatment and good advice. In her house, she always smelled of herbs that made me feel dizzy. The old woman knew absolutely all herbs and always gathered them before sunrise on certain days. She even knew how to prepare various ointments, rubrics, and made special herbal gatherings for various illnesses. The healer could easily cure spinal hernia, sprains, headache, or intestinal problems. Many took small children to her to treat stuttering and bedwetting. Grandma helped absolutely everyone, no matter if a person had money or not, and even at night she would get out of bed and run to the patient if the case was urgent. When she held a person's hand, she would tell him or her what she saw. Everything came true down to the last detail. Even if it seemed unbelievable, everybody knows that such a gift is transmitted through generations, so Miranda could guess the future by the hand since she was a little girl. It happened on a hunch, and not very often. For example, one day, quite accidentally, a teacher at school took her by the hand to help her with an exercise. The girl looked at her strangely, then said, "Your daughter is in trouble. She needs help. She's crying, and she's afraid to tell you. Help her." Vanessa did not believe it at first, thinking that Miranda was just fantasizing, copying her grandmother. However, when she came home, she took a closer look at her daughter. She really looked confused and frightened. It turned out that she was in bad company. She had been bullied and extorted money, and even her phone had been taken away. The very next day, the whole school was buzzing that Miranda really did have a gift, just like Grandma. But it manifested itself only sometimes, on very rare occasions. But when Grandmother began to weaken, give up, and often fall ill, she did give her granddaughter all the secrets and wisdom. But she warned, "I have taught you, Miranda, everything that I knew, but you use your gift only as a last resort. It is a heavy burden. Not everyone can bear to be responsible for someone else's destiny. You can lose your own happiness that way." Only it so happened that at the age of 20 a girl was left all alone on this earth. Her beloved grandmother died so suddenly, just did not wake up in the morning. And that's all. Her heart stopped in her sleep. Miranda still could not come to terms with this loss. But that was not all the hardships that fell on the shoulders of the unfortunate girl. Her fiancé, whom she was madly in love with, and was already getting ready to get married, expecting to live happily ever after with him, treacherously betrayed her and left her, even before she found out that she was pregnant. All of this came together at once and literally crushed Miranda. She cried day and night. Her stomach began to hurt, and there was a threat of a breakdown. The doctor sternly warned her that if she did not pull herself together, she could lose the baby. This is exactly what Miranda did not want, so she resolutely pulled herself together, bought a sedative tea, and set herself a goal, by all means, to get out of depression and raise her baby alone. So she had to remember her gift, and despite her grandmother's warning, use it to survive somehow. The girl placed an ad in the newspaper and on the internet. "I will help you to see the past and the future, all honestly and without deception. Contact me anytime. Cassandra," and gave her phone number. Little by little, She began to go door to door to those who wanted to read her fortune. The woman had not chosen this nickname by chance. She had read many times about the ancient Greek seer who had foreseen the destruction of Troy and admired her gift of foresight. Miranda worked honestly. She never cheated. Everything she predicted always came true. Many people called her to them more than once. They paid her generously, although she did not set a price, which should not be done under any circumstances. Otherwise, the gift could be lost forever. Her grandmother warned her of this at once. Never ask for money. Whatever you give thanks for, you should be content with. The gift should come from a pure heart. And remember that you can only see the fate of a stranger. You can't help a loved one. There's nothing you can do. For each of her outings, Miranda carefully disguised herself, as she was very shy about what she did and did not want to be recognized. She purposely bought green lenses and a black wig with long hair and dressed in many layers of long clothes and puffy skirts to create the image of a fortune teller. After all, an elderly person is more likely to be believed, no matter how you look at it. Finally, the chauffeur turned to the posh restaurant of the recreation center, which was literally in the middle of the forest, and brought the girl out of her memories by saying, "That's it, dear. We've arrived. You're straight on and to the left. There's the banquet hall. I got a call from the manager. They're waiting for you." Miranda was nervous because this was the first time she was performing in front of a large crowd, in public. She was shaking and nauseous. Toxicosis from worrying only increased, plus the hot clothes and makeup did not allow her to breathe. It seemed that she did not have enough air. Many other people were waiting for her turn backstage. Magicians with a huge hat, some variety group, and even an animal trainer with a funny monkey, dressed up like a real fashionista. And here's her entrance. The host of the program announced the next number into the microphone. "Attention, attention. Now each guest of this evening will have a unique opportunity to learn about their past and future. And this is no joke, because Cassandra herself has come to us. The famous witch and fortune teller. Meet her." Miranda stepped into the center of the hall, greeted the audience with a gesture, and went to the improvised tent, where there was a beautiful spinning magic ball, where everything was blowing, twirling, and shimmering, just like in a fairy tale. And she waited for her first client. The first person the host invited was, of course, the bank director, Jacob Austere. At first he refused, thinking it was all nonsense, and he was not in a festive mood at all. Business at the bank was getting worse and worse. Profits were weak and clients were for some reason migrating to the competition. He could not yet figure out the reason. So he entered the tent, said a dry hello, scowled, and silently held out his hand, glancing sideways at the woman, who pretended to be a witch. Miranda looked at her hand in disguise, moved it as if reading the information, then scripturally wizened over the magic ball, moving her hands and whispering something, and suddenly she gave out. "You are the director of this bank. You have big financial problems. No loans are given, and the income is falling catastrophically. If things go on like this, very soon the bank will not hold out. It will simply burst. You are confused and do not know what to do. Most importantly, you cannot understand what is the reason. That is why the mood is as bad as can be. The only thing that makes you happy is that your daughter is getting married soon, and you hope that this union will also help you. You love her very much, and you are worried about an honest and decent son-in-law. That's it for me." The man opened his mouth in surprise at what he heard. "Wow, I thought it was pure trickery. But there's not a soul who knows about what you told me. You described it so accurately. My respects to you." And he came out of the tent puzzled and invited his deputy there. When the next client entered, Miranda physically felt sick. She almost vomited and felt dizzy. After all, standing in front of her was none other than her unsuccessful fiancé, Arthur. The man was expensive and stylishly dressed, a suit and patent leather shoes, impeccable styling. He behaved swaggeringly. He was already quite tipsy. And of course, He did not recognize Miranda in her makeup, and so he said, "So, Cassandra, go ahead and make a big lie to please me. What's waiting for me there?" She tried to suppress her anger and excitement, took Arthur's hand and saw a very unpleasant picture. Here he was making arrangements with accomplices, one of them working for a competitor, and decides to bankrupt the director and bankrupt the bank. They conceived and devised a whole operation, and just in order to have direct access to all the accounts and papers, he decides to marry Jacob's daughter, Kathy, though he does not love her at all and even despises her, considering her just a stupid rich fool. And it is for her that he leaves Miranda. So that's what it's all about. At that very moment, recent memories suddenly flashed before her eyes. Everything flashed by as if it were a filmed sequence. Here she is at the gynecologist's appointment. The latter sends her for an ultrasound. Miranda is already worried and assumes the worst. It was not for nothing that she began to feel so nauseous, especially in the morning, just no power. The girl was trained as a doctor, so she immediately understood what it was all about. But still she hoped, what if her body simply malfunctioned? For example, on a nervous breakdown. When a specialist at the ultrasound confirmed pregnancy and even showed her the very spot, smaller than a poppy seed, which was already a baby, began to congratulate her on it, she could hardly contain her sobs and tried with all her might not to give her condition. And the doctor continued, "Well, why are you so upset? Everything is fine with the baby. Come back in a week. We'll put you on the registry. Are you worried that you are still young and cannot cope? In vain, believe me, the child. This is the greatest happiness in a woman's life. And the experience of caring for the baby will come on its own. The nurse will help. And you cannot cry. The baby feels everything. Try to give him, even in the womb, only positive emotions. Pull yourself together, get dressed, and take care of yourself. Please invite the next patient to come in, please." But the girl didn't seem to hear him at all. She could barely squeeze it out of her. Goodbye. She ran headlong down the stairs. She couldn't breathe. The office seemed unbearably stuffy. She exposed her hot face to the cool wind and burst into tears. Just like that, in the middle of the street, not shying away from passers-by who were staring at her in wonder. Only one thought was beating in her head. What an idiot I am. Idiot. After all, Grandma warned, and I did not believe it. And now what? How am I going to come and tell her all this? I can imagine how she will react. She will probably scold me. The whole thing is that Miranda's mom, when she was her age, got burned the same way, believed in love, and got pregnant, and the guy dumped her, laughed, and snuck out to someone else. That's what he said. You got her pregnant, you bring her up. I had nothing to do with it. Don't hang a yoke around my neck. All the neighbors were talking about it and laughing at Clara. Nana stood up for her daughter, quickly shutting everyone's mouths, though of course she was not happy about it either. She felt sorry for Clara. She was a good student, and she showed promise, and she had to let that scoundrel get in her way. But she did not show it. She consoled her daughter as best she could, and encouraged her to be positive. If only she could have foreseen what awaits them ahead. But, unfortunately, the map of a loved one's fate is closed to the fortune teller. But that was just the beginning of their birth curse. My mother died during childbirth. A blood clot broke off, and my grandmother had to take my newborn granddaughter out of the maternity hospital. After Clara's death, the two of them lived together in the village. It was not easy for the grandmother to raise her granddaughter on her feet, being at an advanced age. But she tried to make Miranda dress and look as well as the other children at school, regularly bought her new clothes, and spoiled her with delicacies. Miranda and Grandma were best friends. They talked at length about life. Nana taught the girl not to rush to open her heart and trust people. Every time she reminded her how things ended with her mother and asked her not to repeat her mistakes. She repeated her thoughts to her granddaughter like a mantra. Remember, Child, first go to university, get a good job, and then think about your family. Choose a boy not by his words, but by his deeds. They can all sing sweetly. Don't be in a hurry. Look hard. Yours ain't going nowhere. The girl went to medical college and left for the capital. For the university grandmother, of course, had no money. Miranda was provided with a dormitory on benefits and was assigned a social stipend. She loved her studies, she tried her best, and took on any part-time work and errands in the dean's office, since life in the capital was not cheap. They regularly called her grandmother, the closest person Miranda had. She told her by phone about all her successes, shared her impressions, and every time at the end of the conversation, Nina reminded her, "Look here, my granddaughter. Don't be tempted. There are so many of them in the big city. Be smart. Think only about your studies and leave your fiancés and love for later." But Miranda, as if by some evil stroke of fate, repeated everything exactly according to her mother's scenario. They met Arthur in the business center. Miranda was taking there a package of documents on behalf of the dean of the faculty, and the man was on his way from important negotiations. They literally bumped into each other near the elevator and both dropped all the papers. Then they laughed for a long time and put them back together. That's how they met. This gray-eyed, natural blonde with long, smooth, like a mirror, hair, and such a naive look from under her fluffy lashes immediately attracted the experienced ladies' man. He, as a hunting dog, immediately picked up the trail. First, he invited her to the cafeteria, which was located right there in the building. They drank coffee and chatted nicely. Arthur fell into the girl's heart so deeply, literally won her over at first sight. What a grown-up, intelligent, businesslike man who knows how to woo and compliment beautifully. For Miranda, who had her first relationship, he seemed like a knight on a white horse. Everything began so quickly, she did not even have time to blink. Baskets of roses, trips to restaurants, trips to the night capital so turned her head that she could not resist and succumbed to temptation. She believed in love. She thought, here it is, my happiness, like in the movies. She was literally bathed in tenderness. Fiancé, he affectionately called her Little Mermaid. Swore to be faithful to the grave and love all my life. Such words whispered in her ear. One thing that frustrated the girl was that her fiancé was in no hurry to introduce her to his friends and parents. It was always just the two of them. Miranda wanted to introduce Arthur to her friends and invite him to her dormitory. The girls really wanted to see him, but he flatly refused and answered sharply, "Miranda, you have to understand, it's not my status to go to the dorms. And what am I supposed to talk about with easygoing girls? It's not my level. And I don't have a lot of friends. They're my business partners, and I only meet them for business reasons. What's with the whimsy? Is it bad for both of us? Or do you have a problem with our relationship?" The girl was frightened, and she began to babble. "No, what are you saying? I love you very much, and I feel good with you. I'm sorry if I hurt you. I don't want to quarrel. It's such a lovely evening." The guy smiled. "What a clever girl. I love understanding girls. Come to me, my doll. I'll caress you." And the couple merged in a passionate kiss. Miranda immediately forgot about everything, sinking into the abyss of pleasure. It ended as suddenly as it started. Arthur just disappeared, didn't pick up the phone, and ignored his bride. Miranda cried, suffered, understood nothing. She lay awake, leaning against the wall, grieving, not wanting to see anyone. She didn't let go of the phone, hoping that Arthur would call her now, and everything would clear up. But time passed, and the phone was stubbornly silent. It seemed to her as if the hands of the clock had stopped and were not moving at all. The girls in the room told her to go to work and talk to him straight, and dot the I's and cross the T's, or forget it. You can't tear your heart out like that. Miranda chose the first option, and even decided to follow the groom, and found out that he was going to marry a rich bride. Every day he led her tenderly by the hand, opened the salon door, helped her to sit down, and just like Miranda, gave her armfuls of roses. Of course, this platinum blonde dressed up in expensive mink coat and crocodile leather boots could not be compared with Miranda in her old down jacket and puffy boots. And still, she was so hurt and hurt. Why had he sworn his love for her? Had she been fooled? So he didn't love her a bit, but just used her like a cheap toy. And now he's played with it, forgotten it, thrown it into a distant corner. She stood him up in the parking lot and sobbed and asked, "Arthur, what's going on? We're not a couple anymore. Why not? Didn't you say you loved me? Where did you disappear to? Don't you answer your phone? You don't call." The guy looked at her as if she were a complete stranger, an empty space, and said coldly, "Stop being ridiculous. We had our fun, and I think we both enjoyed it. Now I've got a change of plans. I'm sorry. I'm getting married. So let's part as friends. And don't follow me. Have some pride. Don't you understand that if a man doesn't call you, he's not interested in you anymore?" Miranda was so angry that she slapped him in the face and shouted, "Friends? You used me, and now you're throwing me away like I'm nothing, and you say so calmly. Go to hell. I hate you." And she ran away crying, and Arthur rubbed his cheek and shouted, "Fuck off, you hysterical bitch. She's such a princess, and I'll have 1,000,000 more like her. And she's fighting too." The girl was already sobbing day and night. She felt so bad, bitter, resentful, and sick to her stomach. She had been thrown in the trash like an old torn shoe. And now this pregnancy on top of that. Miranda came home from the hospital, and the first thing she did was call her grandmother. "Grandmaids, sweetheart, forgive me. I'm so stupid. You warned me 100 times. Now I don't know what to do. I feel so bad. Arthur, my fiancé, left me for another rich bride. And then I found out I was pregnant. How can I go on living? Maybe I should get an abortion before it's too late. Otherwise, God forbid, everything turns out like my mother's. The term is still small. Who will need me then, alone, and with a baby in his arms? And what if I also die in childbirth?" Grandma's voice became agitated, and she almost shouted into the receiver, "Don't you dare even think about it. Killing your child is a terrible sin. Don't cry, don't grieve. Granddaughter, we'll bring up our great-grandson too. What can we do? And this scoundrel who did such a mean thing to you, life will punish him. You know that. Come to the village for the weekend. We'll talk about everything." But it was no longer their destiny to talk. My grandmother died so suddenly, and suddenly, she was already a respectable age. The granddaughter barely survived the funeral. She was literally dragged away from the coffin. She was howling and calling for her grandmother, and she could not imagine how she would live alone. After all, she was all alone on this earth. And now, 3 months later, Miranda meets the wretch Arthur again. His harsh voice brought her out of her memories. "What are you doing there? Have you fallen asleep or something? What's waiting for me?" Miranda pulled herself together and answered in a guttural voice, trying not to give herself away. "I'm just shocked by what I see. Countless riches await you, marriage to a beautiful woman, and a rich life, only happiness and joy ahead. You're a darling of fortune. The heavens themselves patronize you. Money will literally rain gold. You will be able to deny yourself nothing at all." Satisfied Arthur smiled smugly. "Well, that's right. That's the way it should be. I'm a good man. I ain't done nobody no harm. I ain't hurt nobody. So by right I should always be lucky. You've made me happy, old woman. Here you are. You've earned it." And he threw her a crumpled bill of 100 rubles from his pocket. Miranda was filled with hatred for this bastard. She wanted to jump in his face right away and tell him what she had seen and what he was really worth. But another employee dropped into the tent. "Hey, where have you been? Let's go get a drink. Then it's my turn," and led the tipsy deputy out of the tent. Miranda finished her speech with great difficulty, as literally all the tipsy employees decided to find out what was in store for them as far as fate was concerned. What she saw shocked her. It turned out that at least 3 other people secretly passed all the information to competitors and even slipped the bank director to sign fake documents, being in cahoots with them. Yes, Jacob had a snaky group of people on his chest. No wonder his bank was sinking like the Titanic. When the show was over, Miranda called the director, Jacob, though it wasn't easy, aside and whispered to him, "Excuse me, I need to talk to you urgently in private, without anyone hearing us. I have very important information for you." The man was surprised, but he didn't question her and showed her where to go. They went out through the backyard and into the next house. There were hotel private apartments there. It was all nice and well maintained and done in an old style, like a castle. The director opened the room with his key and said, "Come in. This is my personal apartment, a kind of office. I sometimes come here to rest or to work in silence, so that no one disturbs me. At home there are always problems, noise and noise. Guests often come. I don't always manage to concentrate. So what's on your mind? I'm listening." Miranda began to change and took off her makeup in the bathroom. When an ordinary girl in jeans and a sweater came out, the director whistled. "Wow, what a makeover. You're a beauty and so young. I didn't expect. You look just like my daughter Kathy. You look great." Miranda gibbered. "Jacob, listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Your deputy, Arthur, is the last bastard. He and his associates want to bankrupt you. Not only that, but 3 more of your employees, Roberts, Livingston, and Corver, have been leaking all the information to your competitors, and you just recently, or rather the day before yesterday, signed a fake contract. You also don't know the most important thing. Arthur is my ex-boyfriend. He dumped me and decided to marry your daughter. But he doesn't love her at all. He just wants to get close to your accounts and paperwork so he can finish his evil deed, you know. And I'm pregnant by that bastard. Phew, I think I've said it all." Jacob looked at Miranda incredulously, unable to accept and digest the information he had heard. "This all seems too fantastic. Maybe you made it up on purpose, out of revenge for your fiancé leaving you. Are you sure you know what you're saying? Arthur does his job brilliantly. I have no problems with him. I don't know what to say." Miranda replied, "Think what you want, but I have no reason to lie. I just wanted to warn you. And then do as you like. I have to go, goodbye." The director hesitated and pulled out a sizable wad of money. "Yes, of course, I'm not. Here, thank you for the performance." The guests were delighted. They all loved it. "Good luck to you." Jacob had been up all night thinking about what that strange fortune teller had said. On the one hand, everything she was telling him was very improbable. It was as if he were in a den of traitors and enemies. But on the other hand, about the daughter and the bad deeds of the bank, she told the truth. Maybe she is telling the truth about the rest of it too. The director decided to double-check everything, just in case. The first thing he did was secretly put hidden video cameras everywhere he could. Secondly, invited an independent auditing company with an audit, specialists in computer systems. They dug through all the reports and accounting documents. And thirdly, he hired a private detective to follow Arthur. The director was shocked by what he learned a week later. The fortune teller was 100% right. Arthur really had accomplices, and one of them was an employee of a rival bank. The scoundrels had planned such a cunning and masterful plan of bankruptcy that if it were not for Cassandra, they would have succeeded for sure. Along the way, they had caught the thieving accountant and 2 from the legal department in the act. But worst of all, the bastard Arthur, not in the least embarrassed, was playing around and cheating on Kathy left and right, and changing girls like gloves. The private investigator provided a bunch of photos and other evidence. The banker came home and called his daughter to his office. "Kathy, listen, I need to talk to you seriously. It's a shitty case. I'm not going to hide it. You know I'm a straight shooter and I won't lie. Here, see for yourself. I don't think there's any need to comment." And he threw on the table a stack of pictures of Arthur passionately kissing and having intercourse with one young lady and then another. The pictures were fresh, all taken this week. Kathy rounded her eyes and cried. No, Daddy. I don't believe it. It must be a photo montage. That's not who Arthur is. He loves me. Are you trying to break us up on purpose? He really wasn't home last night, but you had an important business meeting late at the restaurant. I didn't even scold him. Business is business. I understand. The man added. We didn't have a business meeting yesterday. That's just it. That cheeky bastard is cheating on you. You know, it's a good thing we found out now, before the wedding. Otherwise, it would have been harder. He also loved a nice girl before you and left her pregnant. That's not an argument either. Okay, here, listen to this. It's a tape from a nightclub. The voice definitely belonged to Arthur. He was cooing with some girl. My sweet Molly, I bought you for the night. Come to me, my chick. And a woman's voice. Of course, my good man. I'll grant your every wish. What about your fiancée? Won't she be jealous if she finds out? I don't want any trouble. Arthur laughed and replied. What's that dumb hen going to notice? She's head over heels in love with me, so she won't know a thing. She makes me sick. No face, no skin, and she's a total log in bed. And yet Daddy's a bank manager. I only need her for a while, for an important case, and then I'll dump her right away. Drunk Arthur talked and talked, but Kathy turned off the tape and cried bitterly on her father's shoulder. How come, Daddy? Didn't he swear his love? He promised to take care of me. I believed him. I love him. I'd die without him. Jacob caressed his treasure. What are you talking about, silly? I'm going to kill you. That scoundrel isn't worth it. You're the dearest thing I have. Everything will be fine. You will meet a decent guy who will love you truly, sincerely. You deserve it, believe me. Take an example from Miranda. This bastard has also left her pregnant, and she is not discouraged. And with scoundrel Arthur and other dark horses in my bank, I'll deal with them tomorrow at the meeting. They'll be in trouble, believe me. The very next day, Jacob called an emergency meeting where he blew the whistle on his subordinates. The employees were surprised when he put in front of them a pile of papers confirming the involvement of some supposedly trusted people whom no one had ever thought to be involved in shady dealings. Arthur and his team flew out of the bank with a wolf ticket, and the accountant too. Moreover, a criminal case was opened against them for stealing large sums of money. Now everything became clear to the director of the bank, why things were going so badly. He wondered how, with such a team in general, is not still bankrupt. Jacob pulled all his connections and made sure that the scoundrel lost everything he had gained illegally, and no self-respecting company would hire him now. 2 more weeks went by. Miranda was still making house calls and guessing, attending lectures at the college, when suddenly the phone rang. On the other end of the line was Jacob himself. Good afternoon, Miranda. This is the director of Capital Plus Bank. I have a business proposition for you. Since all your predictions have come true down to the last detail, I would like to invite you to work for me as a personal consultant. You will be required to be present at all important deals and negotiations, and tell me if partners are unreliable or are up to no good. That's all. I promise not to hurt you with money. What do you say? Miranda was taken aback. Such an opportunity doesn't come along every time, and she gladly agreed to Jacob's offer. She could really use an extra penny right now. She would have to buy so many things for the baby. So, the next Monday, Miranda was enrolled in the staff of the bank as a consultant. She was present at the negotiations, kept up a casual conversation, and as if casually touched her partner's hand, she could clearly see what was on his mind. Thanks to her, it was possible to conclude 4 profitable deals and prevent 2 dark deals, so the banker was quite satisfied. In addition, he introduced her to his daughter, Senia, because they were the same age, and the women became friends, often went to a cafe, ate ice cream, and in their own way, like girls, chatted. It turned out they had a lot in common. Kathy, despite the fact that she grew up in a rich family, was a very good and simple person. not arrogant. And just like Miranda, because of her credulity and naivety, she fell for the rogue Arthur. She was tempted by compliments and honeyed speeches, and only thanks to Miranda, she managed to recognize the scoundrel in time and expose him in the open water. One day, Miranda was walking home from work and saw how a pack of dogs attacked a purebred, beautiful dog with an expensive collar. He was huddled against the wall, but the pack was huge, and the forces were clearly not equal. She felt so sorry for the poor fellow that she grabbed a huge stick and began to disperse the frenzied at the sight of the blood of the pack. Though she was frightened herself, to tell the truth, she didn't want to be bitten in her condition. With great difficulty, she managed to wrestle the dog away. It whimpered and fell back on one paw. It was oozing blood, and its ear was also torn to shreds. She did not hesitate and took the dog to a veterinary clinic. They had to pay a pretty penny, but the dog was treated. The wound was stitched up and treated. Antibiotic shots were prescribed. Already at home, she fed the poor dog and examined his collar. On the back of it was written a telephone number. Without thinking, Miranda dialed the number. On the other end of the line, she heard a pleasant male voice. "Good afternoon. I'm listening to you," the girl said timidly. "Hello. My name is Miranda. I have your dog. He was wandering in the street, apparently lost, and he was attacked by dogs. I barely fought him off. But do not worry, the wound has been stitched. I took the dog to the vet. They helped him professionally. What was his name?" The man shouted in a broken voice. "Wait, how was he wounded and wandering around? He's supposed to be at home, under supervision. And I wondered why my wife wasn't answering the phone. The dog's name is Richie, and I'm Frank. I'm a trucker. I'm on a trip. I'll be back in a couple of days, and I'll pick him up right away. Don't drive him away. Can he stay with you for a while?" Miranda reassured the man. "Don't worry, I didn't save him to kick him out. I'll send you the address in a message now. And don't worry about Richie. We'll get along with him. Can you tell me what he usually eats? I don't know much about dog food. Thank you so much. This is my most faithful friend." The dog really turned out to be very smart and clever. Now Miranda got up an hour earlier in the morning and walked with him in the park, and after work too. He licked her hands and tickled her with his rough tongue. He also gave her a funny paw. Miranda specifically bought him treats and bones as a treat to go with his food. Richie appreciated it and joyfully jumped up and down, wagging his tail. 3 days flew by, and then the owner came for the dog. He turned out to be a pleasant-looking young man, a green-eyed, brown-haired man with expressive, deep and so sad eyes. He said hello from the threshold. "Good afternoon. Are you Miranda? I'm Frank. I'm here to pick up Richie. Thank you so much for saving him and taking him in. I owe you forever." Richie, hearing his master's voice and smelling him, immediately ran into the hallway and jumped right onto his neck. He just fell over Frank, licked his face, and had tears of joy in his eyes. It was so touching that Miranda cried too. "God, it's so good that you found each other. I saw how the dog misses, how he suffers without an owner. After all, dogs are the most loyal creatures in the world. Come into the kitchen. I'll make you some tea, and we'll talk at the same time. Will you tell me how Richie got lost?" Frank immediately became sad. He lowered his head and began his narration. "It's not a funny story at all. While I was on the road, my wife found a lover and ran off with him, and she kicked Richie out on the street to get out of the way. I still can't believe it. Arrived, no belongings, no money I had worked so hard to earn, no dog. But that's not surprising. Helen never liked me. It was me who fell in love, like a complete fool. I saw her, and that was it. I was lost. She's such a beautiful redhead, and she's so shapely. Any model would envy her. Of course, she knew what she was worth. She liked to dress fancy and wear expensive trinkets. She hadn't studied or worked, but that didn't put me off either. We started living together in my apartment. Almost everything I earned, she spent only on herself. She didn't like Richie very much, and he did the same to her. Helen kept telling me that a dog in the apartment was horrible and unhygienic, and we should give him away to someone else. But I didn't even want to hear that. I raised him from a tiny puppy. I fed him by the hour. I vaccinated him. I treated him. I love him like my own child. He's part of my family. That's the reason we fought all the time. Plus, I really wanted kids, but Helen wouldn't have it. They say the figure will spoil. It's too early. And set a condition, or a dog, or a child. Well, how can I take the dog and throw him out? Well, this is a betrayal. And the last 6 months we lived worse and worse. All the time fighting. The neighbors began to tell me that she came home late at night, and to visit her some men. But I didn't believe it to the last. Thought so. So, women's gossip. And then I waited until she completely ran away. So I'm a cuckolding husband, the classic version. That's what I'm doing with Richie. I'm filing for divorce. Why are you alone? So pretty and young. Miranda also sighed heavily. You're not the only one. I'm an idiot too. I fell in love with a guy. Thought we'd get married. He swore his eternal love to me. And then just like that, he disappeared. Turns out he dumped me for a rich bride. After we broke up, I found out I was pregnant. The 4th month. So it's no fun either. I'm going to be a single mother. No one needs me. Well, you have to believe in good things. And don't get discouraged. Frank gibbered. That's right, Miranda. You have someone to live for. After all, a baby is such a happiness. Don't despair. May Richie and I visit you. We'll go for a walk together. It will be good for you and your baby, and it will be a pleasure for me and Richie. Would you mind? Miranda smiled. Of course you do. I'm going to miss Richie. I'm so fond of him. He's so good and obedient and kind. I don't know why anyone would dislike him. I'll see you later. Bye, honey. She petted the dog by the ear, and he wagged his tail and licked her hands. A couple of days passed. Miranda caught herself thinking that she missed Frank very much. She liked him very much. It was somehow so easy and pleasant. But Miranda immediately told herself, forget it. You are expecting someone else's baby. Why do you need Frank? And you with such a burden to him. Frank is just a good acquaintance and the owner of the best dog. When the guy came to her house again with Richie and invited her for a walk, the girl's heart raced and she was very excited to meet him. The couple had a fun and interesting time, Richie making them laugh with somersaults and flips, barking mischievously, and bringing a stick. So gradually the couple became very close. They talked a lot, went to visit each other. There was a tremendous attraction between them, like a magnet. Frank nursed and helped Miranda as her belly was growing by leaps and bounds. He tried to help her carry the heavy bags and went with her to courses for new parents, listening to her how to take care of the baby, so that she would not be sad and lonely there. After all, most expectant mothers went there with their husbands. Not only that, Frank suddenly changed jobs abruptly. They said not to leave the dog alone and moved to the city cab service as a driver. Now they saw each other much more often. In fact, Frank fell in love with Miranda the moment she rescued his pet. He immediately realized that she had a kind and responsive heart. And when the charming gray-eyed beauty with the good-looking figure opened the door to him, he lost his head completely. He was not embarrassed by Miranda's pregnancy. Frank adored children. Because he had 3 younger brothers, he came from a large family. We had fun during his childhood. We were friends. We stood up for each other. We fought. Everything happened. But it certainly wasn't boring. That's why the boy dreamed that his own family would be like that. But in his feelings, he was categorically afraid to admit it. He did not know how Miranda would take it, whether she would push him away, and decided just to be by his side. As a faithful knight, he thought that maybe in this way she would appreciate and understand how much he loved her. But one day something happened that radically changed the situation and turned the relationship between Miranda and Frank upside down. The thing was that Arthur, who had been kicked out of everything, was angry with the whole world, and especially with Miranda for some reason. Although, in fact, it was he who had left her and thought that he did not love her at all. He really just fooled around, and that was it. Recently, Arthur saw her walking hand in hand with a young man. They were cooing and laughing. The dog was running in front of her and wagging his tail. Miranda's belly was already very noticeable, but it did not spoil her at all. The woman was happy, blooming, and just shining with a smile. Not only that, the bastard found out that she was now working at Jacob Bank as a consultant. He was blown away by this. What kind of a consultant is this brat? With my experience and knowledge, I was kicked out like a dog, and this little whistleblower was accepted. So she had a hand in all this. But she looks like a sheep. Well, nothing. I'll make her dance. No one can humiliate Arthur. The man was getting more and more drunk and was already mentally getting rid of his abuser. He did not know why he was so angry that Miranda had become happy against all odds. Arthur had thought she was still crazy about him, and now she was walking around with someone else. What a bitch. The couple always went for walks with the dog at the same time on certain days. It had already become their little tradition. So on one of those days, Arthur had been waiting for them in the park, waiting for a long time behind the trees, and gradually drinking whiskey, thinking up a plan of revenge. And then, seeing the happy trio, abruptly jumped out into the alley. He had a table knife in his hand, grinned wickedly, and walked straight at the girl. "Well, hello, my love. Did you recognize me? I see you haven't been grieving for long after the breakup. You already got yourself a new boyfriend and got pregnant. What about me? Didn't you swear your love to me too? Since when did you become a consultant at a bank? Why did you get hired there? Hey, answer me, you viper." Miranda was greatly frightened, but did not take her eyes off and answered firmly. "Remember that fortune-teller in the marquee at the corporate party who promised you untold riches? Well, that was me. But that's not what I saw in your hand. That you wanted to bankrupt Jacob and marry Kathy on account. And I told him all that. Isn't that so? Or did I lie about something? You got carried away, Arthur, and you chopped off the branch you were sitting on. You had everything. You had a great job, a loving fiancé. But you chose lies and betrayal and hypocrisy. You're the one who told me you didn't want me. And you told me to get out. So what do you want now? Yes, I fell in love with Frank. And he's not like you, loyal and reliable. We're gonna get married soon and have a real family." And she turned to the dazed Frank and kissed him passionately. It even took her breath away. Arthur was finally furious. "Ah, you bitch, no one dares to humiliate Arthur. Remember, you're going to pay for this. You'll remember me." And he went at Miranda with a knife. But then the faithful Richie bravely stood up to defend the woman, jumped up to the offender in 2 leaps, and dug his teeth into the hand where the knife was. Well, Frank was left to twist the fluttering assailant and call the police. By this time, a crowd of onlookers had gathered around them, who had seen everything that had happened, and testified that it was Arthur who had attacked the young men with a knife. The scoundrel was taken away. He was shouting curses at Miranda and Frank, and kept threatening violence. Alcohol had done its work, and the man did not know what he was doing. Miranda stroked the dog and thanked him. "Thank you, my savior. My good, bravest dog. You were not afraid. You protected me. How not to love you." Suddenly, Frank turned her sharply toward him and looked her straight in the eye and asked, "Is it true what you said to your ex-boyfriend about loving me? Don't lie. It's important for me to know. Please answer me honestly. Did you just want to piss him off?" Miranda sighed. "It's true. I fell in love with you a long time ago, back when we first met, but I was afraid to admit it. Why do you need me? With someone else's child? It's such a burden and responsibility. I don't even know how I'm going to cope. I don't want to involve you in all this. You'll find yourself a nice girl, and she'll give you a baby yours. But no matter how much I talk to myself, it's no use. I dream about you at night, to tell you the truth. And I can't do anything about it. Phew, I finally said it. Now you don't want to see me anymore for sure. Frank pressed Miranda to him and kissed him as passionately and as long as she kissed him. Then he whispered, "My silly girl, I fell in love with you right away too. And just like that, idiot, I was afraid to tell you about it. You know, I thought you'd misunderstand me, or you'd drive me away, push me away. What fools we are. And the baby you're carrying is no stranger to me. He's not even born yet, but I already love him. You know, and I'll raise him as my own. You know, I am even grateful to your ex for today. Otherwise we would have suffered further and did not dare to confess their feelings. That's it. It's settled. You're moving in with me today. We're family now. And after the weekend, we're going to get married in a registry office. I'll introduce you to my family. I don't have a father, but I have a wonderful, kind mother and 3 brothers. They are sure to like you." Miranda's heart felt so warm and good. What a happiness, now she is not alone. She has a real family, and she no longer has to suffer and hide her feelings, to cry into her pillow at night. Frank's whole family took her in very well. They bought everyone gifts and came to visit. The man introduced her that way. "Mom, brothers, meet my brothers. This is Miranda, my favorite woman, and we're about to have a baby boy, my son." Mom splashed her arms and immediately hugged the woman. "Oh, my son, why didn't you say anything until last? What a partisan. We're so happy. At last, I'll get to see my grandchildren. Miranda, come in, my daughter. We're going to sit down at the table. Don't be shy. We're keeping it simple. Make yourself at home. You are a part of our big family now." In the midst of the feast, Frank's mother had a heart-to-heart talk with Miranda. "You're a nice, polite woman, not like his ex-girlfriend. That's where the bastard was. She turned her nose up at us and said hello every other time. Frank suffered so much with her. She was walking left and right. The whole neighborhood knew about it. She was being driven home drunk in different cars. And she wasn't even ashamed of it. And I kept praying that Frank was a good woman. You will not be disappointed in him. We are simple people, not very rich, but kind and sympathetic. My boys are all great. They stand up for each other, have been working since they were little, and help me. You know, it was hard for me to raise 3 of them on my own. James, my husband, died early, Steve. The youngest was only a year old. And such a ridiculous death. He was too cold at work and got pneumonia. He burned up in a week. From that day on, the couple started living together in Frank's apartment. It turned out that they were so alike. They had the same taste for everything, the same interests. They hardly ever fought at all. Frank took such care of Miranda, took care of her, stroked her belly, and played music, talked to the baby to get her used to his voice. Miranda was so sweetened by it. "Hello, little one. It's me, your daddy. How are you doing in there? Mommy and I are looking forward to seeing you and loving you very much." The woman almost wept with happiness at such moments, but the fortune-telling was over. The gift was completely gone. She could no longer read anything on her hand. There were no visions. One day, when Frank was on shift, she went to visit her grandmother in the cemetery. She tended to it, put a fresh bouquet on the grave, wiped the dusty photo. Her grandmother looked at her like she was alive. All the same kind, radiant eyes, so forgiving and all-understanding. God, how Miranda missed her grandmother, her wise advice and exhortations. So much I wanted to just hug the closest person and not part with him. For a long time, I sat and talked to her and asked her questions. "Grandmother, why can't I see anything anymore? Where has my gift gone?" I did my fortune-telling honestly, without cheating, without taking any money. I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't lie to anyone. What happened? But no matter how much she listened to herself, there was no answer. Only the wind swayed the tree crowns and the sky frowned back at her. Without waiting for an answer, Miranda finally froze and took the train home. She stared at the village houses, bent with time, where her carefree, barefoot childhood had once passed. That night, however, Miranda dreamt of her grandmother. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, as she had when she was a child, stroking her head and whispering, "Granddaughter, your gift is gone because you are happy now. Your soul is finally at peace. So it should be. But you should know that if any misfortune happens, the gift will reveal itself again and will help you for sure. That I know for sure. I am very happy for you, and now I feel calm here. You will have a boy, and then 2 girls. You will live a long and happy life with Frank. That's it, honey. I have to go. I can't go any longer. Take care of yourself. God bless you." She crossed her as she used to when she was a little girl and wiped away a tear that had run up. Miranda jumped up and scrambled around the bed. She couldn't believe it was just a dream. It was as if it was real. She whispered, "Grandma, don't go away. Stay with me just a little longer, please." A frightened Frank also woke up and turned on the light. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? Are you all pale and in a cold sweat? Did you have a nightmare? Or are you sick? Should we call an ambulance? Just tell me where it hurts. I'll be right back." He pressed her gently against him, covered her with a blanket so she wouldn't catch cold, and Miranda said quietly, "My grandmother came to me in a dream, as if alive, in her colorful kerchief and her favorite polka dot robe. You know, she told me that you and I would live happily ever after, and I would have a boy and 2 girls, and that you were my destiny. You know, I believe her. I feel so good with you, and I'm very afraid of losing you." Frank hugged her quietly and soothed her. "Don't be afraid, my love. I won't go anywhere. I won't disappear, and I'll always be there. All our troubles and hardships are behind us, and only happiness and joy lies ahead. Now come to bed. I will make you some sweet tea and bring you your favorite cookies." 5 months later, Miranda, without any difficulties, gave birth to a healthy giant, weighing as much as 400. The son was named Andrew. When they put him to the mother's chest, for the first time in her life, the woman burst into tears, not from grief, but from happiness. She had no idea what joy was inside of her. She was filled with a universal love for her baby. She kissed his nose and chubby cheeks, and whispered to herself, "Thank you, Grandma, for not letting me commit a sin back then. You've been protecting me since I was a little girl. Here, your grandson was born. I believe that you can see him from heaven and are happy for me too." At discharge, a happy Frank proudly held the baby in his arms and told everyone, "This is Andrew, my son. You can tell right away, man." He kept his word and registered his son in his own name. No one at the maternity hospital was even surprised. Many congratulated him and said the boy looked just like his father. The couple decided not to procrastinate and had a christening a month later. The godmother was invited to be Kathy, Jacob's daughter. They were now very friendly, and the woman happily accepted the offer. Kathy was glad for her friend that she was lucky to find her happiness, and she was eternally grateful to Miranda for saving her from misfortune and marriage to the scoundrel Arthur in time, and for saving her father from bankruptcy. And Frank's best friend Kevin was called to be the baby's godfather. He was a strong programmer and worked for a reputable company. It was here at the event, and the relationship between the young men began. At first, they were united by the baptism of Andrew. Both were very nervous when they changed clothes and held the baby in their arms. Then they became friends, the 4 of them together, as cousins to get together on kebabs, and just on the weekend. And soon Kathy and Kevin also became a couple. They didn't wait too long to get married, because Kathy was pregnant too. Miranda and Frank went to a best friend's wedding, and then to a christening. Jacob was happy for his daughter. Kevin may not be a rich man, but you can see at once how much he loves his daughter, how much he cares, and that is the most important thing. 5 years later, Frank and Miranda had 3 children running around in their family. It was just as Grandma had said. Andrew, Nancy, and Jenna. They had sold the apartment and bought a big house outside of town to make room for everyone. Frank was happy, so his dream came true. A friendly family and lots of kids. Miranda, from a slim, gray-eyed cutie, grew into a beautiful, statuesque woman, rounded out, more feminine. It was not easy. Try to run all day and keep track of 3 shooters, tired as hell, and still late in the evening, when everyone was napping in their beds, she lovingly adjusted the blankets, kissed her favorite noses and cheeks, cleaned cubes and dolls scattered around the house, and was perfectly happy. After all, motherhood is a woman's greatest calling, no matter who says what. Frank turned out to be a great husband and a real head of the family. Miranda was like a stone wall behind him. Things happened. There were offenses and tears sometimes, but every time Frank always came up to his wife first, held her in his arms, and whispered in her ear, "And I still love you, even though you're an insufferable pest sometimes, but I don't need anyone else." His warm and sincere words made her feel so good and warm in her heart. Immediately, all resentment and anger disappeared, and she hugged her husband back and whispered, "I love you so much too. Let's make up." Richie was the family favorite. Now he had someone to play with and play ball with. He adored the kids and let them do whatever they wanted with him. He put up with everything and took them for a ride. The kids squealed with delight, and they loved their pet too. Miranda did not regret at all that her gift was gone and never came back. But she gained much more: love, a husband, children, and a home in which happiness settled for many years.